She wheeled into that diner like she did every Tuesday. Quiet, unnoticed, just trying to enjoy her cup of bitter black coffee in peace. But peace wasn't on the menu that day. It started with a voice, loud, nasty, and full of something mean. Shouldn't she eat somewhere else? This place wasn't made for wheels. That's what one of them said. Three of them, bikers, loud leather vests, steel-toed boots, the whole tough guy act. They strutted in like they owned the place, laughing like hyenas at their own jokes. One of them leaned in close to her, sneering. And then he tipped her wheelchair. Not hard enough to flip it, just enough to shove her into the booth beside her. Her tray crashed to the ground. A coffee cup exploded by her feet. Silverware clanged like an alarm bell, but no one moved. No one said a word. And her? She didn't scream. She didn't even speak. But someone saw it. A boy near the window, maybe 9 or 10. He looked up at his dad, wide-eyed, not really understanding what he was feeling. But his dad understood all too well. He didn't get up, not yet, but he pulled out his phone. Exactly 30 minutes later, everything changed. But let me take you back first, back to who she was. Her name was Jo Carter. She always sat at the far left corner of the Griddle House Diner in Ironwood, Montana. Same table every time. Right beneath the dusty wall clock that ran 5 minutes slow. She liked it that way. Predictable, familiar, safe. Jo wore her service pin clipped to the collar of her flannel shirt, a habit from the old days. Her hands, calloused but steady, folded napkins with the kind of precision you only see in people who've built their life around discipline. She never asked for more than a few hours per shift, and nobody ever heard her complain. Not once. She was 46, a former Marine who'd served in 2 brutal deployments overseas. The second one had taken more than just her left leg. It took a piece of her soul. After that, she didn't chase sympathy. She chased silence, structure, control. Her wheelchair squeaked faintly when she shifted, and she didn't try to hide it. She preferred it over the prosthetic. She said the chair was honest. But behind that quiet strength was a history written in grit, gunpowder, and too many nights under foreign skies. She kept to herself. Roll, fold, place. Breathe, repeat. It was her way of staying grounded in a world that moved on too fast for people like her. And most days, it was enough. The regulars usually nodded at her in passing. Some avoided eye contact. Maybe her missing leg made them uncomfortable. Maybe her silence did. But Jo didn't mind. She wasn't there to be noticed. But that Tuesday, everything broke. The door slammed open. 3 guys walked in like a storm. Denim, leather, noise, and bad intent. Their names were stitched right on their backs: Ox, Clutch, and Razor. It was like something out of a bad movie. And the leader, Ox, had this look, the kind that says, "You're not gonna stop me, are you?" He spotted Jo right away. Grinned. "Well, look who rolled in," he said, just loud enough for everyone to hear. Clutch barked out a laugh. "What's this? Combat Cinderella? Bet she's here for a pity tip." Jo didn't even blink. She just kept folding napkins, calm, measured, like she didn't hear it, like it didn't matter. But it did, because they weren't teasing, they were circling. Razor slammed a palm on the counter. "Hey, we getting service here or what?" Jo rolled up, smooth and professional. "Would you gentlemen like today's special?" Ox smirked. "Sure, soldier girl, roll it over." It was too loud, on purpose. Clutch leaned in, sneering. "You know, it's kinda gross they let people like you serve food. Ain't that some kind of violation?" No one said a thing. The girl behind the register glanced up, then went back to scrubbing an already clean napkin dispenser. A couple at the corner booth paused, then turned away like nothing was happening. Eyes everywhere, but no one willing to meet hers. Joe set the menus down, one by one. Knife, fork, napkin. Steady, controlled. She turned her chair away, tried to get back to her rhythm, but Razor wasn't done. He stood up, walked toward her. "You deaf lady?" he barked. "We're talking to you." And then it happened. Without warning, he grabbed the handles of her wheelchair and yanked. The jolt sent her flying forward. Her tray flew. A hot coffee pot crashed, the boiling liquid splashing her sleeve. A fork skittered across the linoleum. Her chair slammed sideways against a table leg, and Joe hit the floor. Hard. Her right leg twisted underneath her. The prosthetic bent the wrong way. Pain ripped up her side, the kind that makes you see spots. And still, no one moved. The place went dead silent. Clutch chuckled. Ox leaned back like he'd just won a game. Razor crossed his arms. And Joe? Joe didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just lay there, hands pressed against cold tile. Her wallet had fallen out, and from it a worn, creased photograph slid across the floor. It showed her squad, young, proud, battered, but smiling. And on the back, scrawled in black Sharpie, "She carried us every damn time." She pushed herself up, slow, not because she was weak, but because dignity takes time. Her jaw clenched, her eyes locked forward. Not once did she look at them. No one helped her. The room had frozen. No one knew what to do with someone like her, someone who'd seen war, someone who bore the price. She uprighted the chair in one smooth, practiced move, climbed back in. Coffee soaked her shirt. Her marine pin was stained. Her jeans were wet. But her back? It was still straight. The boy at the window finally whispered, "Dad, is she a soldier?" The man in the ball cap with the old patches on his jacket didn't answer right away. He looked at Joe, at the photo, at the silence sitting heavy in that room. Then he stood, calm, quiet, and he made a call. "I need to report something," he said, walking out into the golden afternoon. "No, not official, but it concerns one of ours." He hung up and waited. Inside, Joe adjusted her sleeves, ran her hands over her lap, not brushing off crumbs, just reminding herself of where her heart still lived. She didn't know it yet, but help was already on the way. The laughter came back, louder this time, like nothing had happened, like they hadn't just shoved a disabled veteran to the ground in front of a packed diner. Ox banged his coffee cup against the table, calling for a refill. Clutch was fiddling with a butter knife like a bored school kid. Razor stretched out, boots propped up like he owned the place. Joe stayed in her corner. She didn't move, didn't speak. Her hands rested neatly in her lap, her spine upright like she was bracing for another hit. Not from them, but from the silence that kept coming after. The photo was back in her wallet, but her clothes still carried the stains. Her face stayed calm, but inside was something different now. A pressure, a heat. And then came the sound. Tires on gravel. Not the kind of sound that comes from a regular truck. This was heavier, slower, intentional, like it was built to show up in moments just like this one. A military green SUV rolled up outside the Griddle House diner. Dust curled around its wheels like it was announcing itself. It parked straight in front of the door, engine still running, steady, quiet, and full of power. Inside, the diner fell silent. Again. But this time, it wasn't shame. It was anticipation. The door swung open. 3 Marines stepped in. Not one said a word. They didn't need to. The first was a master sergeant, broad-shouldered, silver hair buzzed short, and a polished cane tapping lightly against the floor as he walked. His limp was slight, but his presence wasn't. His eyes scanned the room like he was assessing a battlefield. Behind him came a young Marine, tall and clean-cut, pushing an empty wheelchair. His face was sharp, his eyes steady. Not here for drama, here for someone. The third? A woman, a Marine captain. Her uniform gleamed under the diner lights. Ribbons lined her chest, and her steps didn't just echo, they declared. She didn't speak, but every person in that room knew this woman didn't walk in unless there was a reason. Even the waitress froze mid-step. The tray in her hands tilted slightly. The couple by the window sat up straighter. The boy looked at his dad, eyes wide. Ox went still. Clutch stopped fidgeting. Razor blinked, confused. Joe didn't move. Not until the master sergeant stopped in front of her booth, stood tall, straightened his shoulders despite the limp, and offered a textbook salute. "Staff Sergeant Carter," he said, voice like steel warmed over a fire. "Forgive our delay." Joe didn't think. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. She returned the salute, sharp, crisp, like it was muscle memory stitched into her bones. And for the first time that day, her eyes lit up. Not with anger, not with pain, but with something that had been missing for a long time. Recognition. Respect. The captain stepped forward, eyes locked on Joe. "We received a call," she said, each word firm but steady, that a decorated Marine had been publicly harassed on civilian ground. Her gaze turned, slow, deliberate, and it landed on them. Ox, Clutch, Razor, the ones who thought no one would come. Now, they couldn't even meet her eyes. The captain didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. We were told physical assault was involved. Joe shook her head. "It's nothing," she whispered. But that wasn't the end of it. The master sergeant didn't blink. "With respect, Staff Sergeant," he said, his voice now loud enough to echo across the room, "it is not nothing. Nobody touches one of ours. Not in combat, not in peace, not ever." Then the younger Marine stepped up, eyes locked not on the bikers, but on Joe. "Staff Sergeant Carter led our unit through Kandahar. She pulled 3 men from a burning Humvee after it hit an IED. I was one of them." Joe looked up. Recognition cracked through the shell on her face. "Private Evans?" she asked. "Corporal now, ma'am," he nodded, his voice thick. "Thanks to you." And then, the moment shifted. The boy near the window stood up, slow, hesitant. His dad rose too, hand on his shoulder. A quiet nod passed between them. Across the diner, an old man in a Korean war cap pushed to his feet. No words, just a solemn salute. A woman by the door followed. 2 National Guard members near the counter, people no one had even noticed until now, stood as well. No ceremony, just solidarity. Within seconds, half the diner was standing, straight-backed, silent, a wall of respect, of gratitude. The bikers? They didn't move. Goose slumped into his seat like he was trying to disappear. Ox looked away. Razor shifted uncomfortably, his boots suddenly too loud on the floor. For the first time since they barged in, they didn't own the room. Joe did. And she hadn't even raised her voice. A week later, the sign outside the Griddle House diner was gone. In its place, a freshly painted wooden board now read, "Homefront Cafe," where respect is always on the menu. Nobody made a big announcement about it. There wasn't some grand reopening, but the town of Ironwood noticed, because everything inside had changed, not loudly, but unmistakably. Along the back wall, where a faded poster used to hang, there was now a framed display. Photos of local veterans lined the frame, some in dress blues, others in dusty fatigues. Below each photo, a name, a unit, years of service. It was a quiet shrine to sacrifice, to stories most people never heard but needed to feel. The booth where the bikers once sat, it stayed empty, not because anyone banned them, but because no one wanted to sit there anymore. Jo still came in every afternoon, still folded napkins with that same precision, still wheeled herself to her corner table without fuss. But something was different now. Her marine pin wasn't tucked under her collar anymore. It was out in the open, proud. Taped to the back of her wheelchair was a small American flag patch, edges frayed, colors faded, but you couldn't miss it. Customers who used to look away now stopped to nod. Some said thank you. Others just made eye contact. A small gesture that said, "I see you." Above her booth hung a small plaque, reserved for those who served. Dave, the manager, the same guy who once froze behind the counter while Jo was thrown to the ground, he'd changed too. He wore a pressed shirt now, a tie with a flag pin at the collar. He even hired 2 more veterans that week. One worked the kitchen, the other weekend shifts up front. And Melissa, the young waitress who once stared at the sugar dispenser to avoid doing anything, now she asked questions about the difference between Staff Sergeant stripes and captain bars, about how to say sir without sounding sarcastic, about what not to ask a vet. Jo didn't lecture, she just shared, gently. And every Thursday, like clockwork, the Marines came back. At 1800 sharp, that same green SUV rolled into the lot. Sergeant Wilson, Captain Rodriguez, Corporal Evans. No big entrances, no speeches, just quiet footsteps and firm handshakes. They sat at Jo's table. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. They didn't need to. Coffee, silence, memory. What started as one act of cruelty had become a living monument, not just to Jo, but to every veteran who'd ever walked through Ironwood unnoticed. Then one evening, just as the Montana sun dipped behind the hills, the door to Homefront Cafe creaked open again. A young man stood in the doorway, barely out of high school, eyes wide, back stiff in a brand-new army uniform. His cap was clenched in both hands like it might fly away if he didn't hold tight. He looked lost. Jo noticed him right away. She didn't wait. She wheeled forward, the little flag on her chair catching the orange light pouring in from the windows. "First deployment?" she asked gently. He nodded. "Shipping out tomorrow morning, ma'am." She gestured to her table. "Sit down. Coffee's decent. Company's better." He hesitated. I wouldn't want to intrude." Jo smiled, soft but sure. "You're not intruding, soldier. You're continuing a tradition." He sat down, nervous at first. But then Sergeant Wilson raised his mug in a silent toast. One by one, others around the diner did the same. Some with hands that trembled, others with posture still sharp from decades of habit. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The message was loud and clear. You are seen. You are one of us. You'll never stand alone. Since that day, the entire town began to shift, not all at once, but in ways that stuck. Jo, who once folded napkins in silence, was now being asked to speak at the local high school. She stood before a room full of students, kids who had never known a world at war, who only understood service through headlines or movies. But Jo didn't talk about battles or medals. She talked about what the uniform really meant: discipline, purpose, carrying others when they can't walk themselves. She didn't talk like a hero. She talked like someone who had seen what happens when people stop looking out for each other. After that, things changed. Business owners began offering discounts to veterans. Quietly, no signs, just respect. A black granite memorial was approved for the center of Ironwood's town square. Nothing flashy, just one solid stone, with simple silver letters carved into the face. To those who served with dignity, and those who stood with them. Jack and the other bikers, they never came back. People said Jack lost his job, something about a video that made its way around town, something about conduct, The companies didn't want to be associated with anymore. No one talked about it much. Joe never asked. She had more important things to focus on. Like the young female recruit who now stopped by every Sunday to ask about basic training. Her notebook always tucked under one arm, her questions nervously scribbled in the margins. Or the Vietnam vet who finally wore his medals again after 4 decades of hiding them in a box under his bed. Or the mother who came in once a week to sit quietly with her coffee, always near Joe's booth, always looking like she had more to say than she could ever put into words. One night, as the last light slipped behind the trees, the green SUV parked out front once again. No big ceremony, just tradition. Taped to the passenger window was a simple note, written in permanent marker. "We always come back for those who never quit." And inside, surrounded by mugs of lukewarm coffee, the faint sound of old stories, and a kind of silence that didn't feel empty anymore, Joe Carter finally felt what she'd been looking for all these years. Not pity, not attention. Home.